Hello and welcome to That Eurovision site. Today I am joined by Isabel and Shiloh, and today we will be talking about the results of Festivali e Këngës. At the time of this recording, this is about 5 days after the festival concluded. We will be going through our thoughts on Albania's Eurovision selection, as well as the shows itself and the songs. On Thursday night, Albina and Famia Kelmendi were selected to represent Albania at the Eurovision 2023 Song Contest with the song Do Ya. So I think my first question to you guys is, what are your thoughts on Do Ya?
I love it. It reminds me of Adio, Montenegro 2015, musically speaking. And that's obviously a huge classic. Love that. This is obviously a slightly different. It's more melodically that it reminds me of that, but I love that it does. I think that makes it catchy. And I mean, Adio placed a very respectable 13th in the grand final in 2015. I think that Do Ya will benefit from a rethink in the staging. But I think musically it doesn't need a revamp. It doesn't need touching at all. I think the staging needs to be more dynamic, maybe a little less cheesy, but the song itself is great. I think it's really moving and I think it's catchy. So love to see it from Albania.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I don't dislike it. I think it's fine. I think it's very Albanian. It's very Balkan, and I there were other songs in Festivali Këngës that I liked more. That I liked a lot more, but I don't think it was the worst thing that they could have picked. I think that there were a lot of worse songs that Albania could have sent. And I'm going to be diplomatic and not name them. I really don't know how it will do in Eurovision though. I genuinely don't know. Like it could place it could place left side of the scoreboard, or it could like completely not qualify. I think it, like Isabel said, it's really up to how they stage it, because I have no idea how Europe as a whole is going to react to that.
I think in Festivali Këngës, Albina and Famia Kelmendi's performance of Do Ya was emotional, and I thought it was very, very powerful. Like, I feel with a good revamp, this will be a brilliant moment in Liverpool. I feel the Albanian public made a great decision in sending this to Eurovision. I really hope the revamp of this song, because I know Albania always do a revamp. This song needs to remain in Albanian because, like, the topic seems to be about home and love for one's family, and I feel like that would get lost for me if they translated this into English. I don't think the song would work for me at all if it's translated into English. Um, the song just wouldn't feel as personal to Albina or her family if this song was translated. I just don't think it would work. I feel the changes in genre throughout the song actually work really nicely for me. You have the ballady parts, which are raw and emotional, and you feel the togetherness of the family. And you also have like the more ethnic dance parts, which feels like a celebration of their culture and who the family are. So I really, really like it. And I really enjoy this, and I hope we see this in the final in Liverpool because it's something different and it's definitely something I enjoy. So yeah, I feel like my next question is going a little bit into the festival in general. Were there any other songs from the festival that you enjoyed when you listened to, and thoughts on the shows overall?
Yeah, I was much more engaged by this festival than I was last year's. I have only ever seen these two, last year's and this year's festival, live. So my experience with FIC is limited, but I found a lot more that was of interest to me personally in this festival. I want to just shout out two of my favorites didn't qualify for the final. They're leaning into this sort of combined Sanremo Giovanni Sanremo situation with this newcomers. I think it's new anyway, this newcomers selection whereby it's integrated into the first two nights. You have these they've done this weird thing where they've lumped the alternative groups in with sort of the newer solo artists, and they only had some of those qualify into the final. And two of those acts were among my favorites. Anduel Kovaci sang Mali, and it was the stuff of my Persian dreams. Really, really, I've said before that Albania often leans Eastern Mediterranean, and even leans into kind of West Asia in a way that really reminds me of home. And nothing has done that so much to me as Mali did. And I thought that he sang it beautifully, and the instrumentation was spot on. I just absolutely adored it. It was one of my top 3 of the festival, and then he didn't qualify, and I just think that that is a shame. And then completely different vibe entirely. Sara Capo gave this. I got and I may be wrong here, I got that she was a performance artist, like, so singing isn't her number one thing, which I think came across both for better and worse, right? Like, she felt really comfortable on the stage, but you could sort of tell that singing wasn't maybe her number one sort of kind of career, that this was maybe something a bit new for her. I mean, the way she described it anyway was this was a new experience. But Parateye was such an interesting, cool, sultry, jazzy number. The jazz that we tend to get at Eurovision is not up my street at all. It's that kind of like swingy kind of, you know, band type stuff, which I absolutely despise. Like, it just makes me want to run for the hills. But I was raised on jazz and stuff that's more experimental, avant-garde, and also stuff that's a bit more like this, that's kind of just leaning into a slightly, almost a spoken word place, but just that sultry vibe, and I just loved it. And I was upset not to see her in the final. So those are 2 of my big favorites. I think that Erma Mitsi, who we know won the Newcomers Award, she's obviously one to watch. I thought, again, a different kind of jazzy vibe, and one that I really enjoyed. What a power vocalist. I think she was fab. Gjergi is always a pleasure to see. He's become like a mainstay of the festival, and it's just really nice for me, I think, to have this really confident, at ease, alternative presence at the festival, because it's something that Albania can do, but we don't see them sent to Eurovision that often. I thought that Maniola and Albani, Sergio Haidini and Alban and Lores songs were all really catchy, really delightful. Nice to see some more upbeat, really kind of boppy, groovy numbers, right? This is stuff that I think was really lacking from last year's festival, so I'm really glad to see those. I think all of those would have been competitive picks for ESC, actually. But yeah, overall, I was just really pleased to see such a musical diversity this year. And lovely to see the production values kicking up a notch from last year too. They're leaning into the Sanremo vibe. I think that it is a good move. I think that really leaning into the song festival element is, I think it's going to work for them.
Yeah, I have not watched Festivali Këngës in a very long time. I think I said in my live tweet that the last time I watched it was like 2017. And I was really pleasantly surprised by the quality of the songs that we got on the whole. Not necessarily like the performances, but like the composition I felt was really, really solid. Isabel's laughing at me because I called out some people for going off key during my finale live tweet. I thought that Vanessa Sono, one of the other newcomers, I thought that she did really, really well. And I think that her song Aroma Yon would have done really well at Eurovision. Actually, she was a very like involved performer and a really solid, strong vocalist. And like, I feel like, especially like in previous years where there was a little bit more emphasis on the jury than we're going to see this year, I feel like that could have done really, really well. I also liked Sergio Haidini's song Vestira a lot. I thought it was fun. I liked his little blue suit. I think that there were a lot of really solid vocalists. I think that Evi Recci also did a really good job like performing vocally. And yeah, Erma Michi, I also thought that her song was fun. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about Elsa Lila in a minute, but I also thought that she did really well. So yeah, overall, there were a lot of really great songs that I really enjoyed.
I felt in particularly the first 2 shows that I watched, the 2 semi-finals, they went a lot smoother than I am used to with Festivali Congress. I'm used to a lot of filler in the festival, and I feel like there was less of that this year, which I think is a good thing on the broadcaster's part. I think if you watch Festivali Congress in like 2018, 2019, there was lots of filler, and it was like 10-15 minutes long, and then they'd go to an ad break, and it's just like the festival would go on until like 1 a.m, and it was a lot. I feel that's really been ironed out by the broadcaster, which I think is a really good thing. Like you get more of the performers performing, and you like, I think like something they have introduced is like talking to the performers before they perform, so you get like a little introduction to them, which I think is really, really nice. I know San Remo do it, so
The San Remo effect, exactly.
there is definitely a San Remo effect, which I think they were going to bring this into Eurovision, which I personally would not have minded. But apparently it would have gone on too long, so they couldn't do that. As for like the other songs, Do Ya was definitely actually my favorite in the festival, so I'm very happy with what won. I think I'm just going to roll off the song Sergio Houdini with Vishtia. It was just a nice, fun, up-tempo, almost jazzy song, which I think like actually it worked. Sometimes like jazz either works or it falls flat, especially when it's more up-tempo. Like it can either be really, really good and it can be really, really fun and really enjoyable, or it can be really cringe. And this was obviously just really fun and it really worked. And I thought his little blue suit with like the gold stage, I thought it made it really stand out. Another song that I really, really enjoyed was Lynx's Nuse Ka Besim. It's sort of a throwback to like the late like noughties rock that we got. I actually didn't see this as something for Eurovision, but something as it is a little like that type of rock is a little bit dated, but definitely something that I would enjoy like outside of any contest. Like, and obviously Festivali Congress is not a national final really. It's more a festival for music in Albania, so I don't mind seeing songs in the festival that are not necessarily for Eurovision. And same like San Remo and I guess Melfest in kind of a way, because I know for like in Sweden, like a lot of artists are there to like just promote their own music, not necessarily for Eurovision. So like in some national finals, I'm completely fine with that. And I guess my last point is getting on to the winner of Festivali Congress, Elsa Lilla with Evita. She won the festival, but obviously she was not selected to go to Liverpool by the public. Do you think this format change will actually work? Like picking the public picking the Eurovision representative separately to the juries picking the winner of the festival. Do you think this will work in Albania's favour in Liverpool, or do you think Evita would have done pretty well?
Oh, I think this was brilliant. I think this is absolutely going to work in Albania's favour. I still think that Albania will struggle to qualify because I think Albania always struggles to qualify. We talked a bit in our podcast episode on Albania about this. It's sort of a little bit, although it's in that it is in the Balkan area. It's got a little bit of it's a little bit more isolated culturally than its neighbours for lots of different reasons. I think that especially this year with 3 Balkan countries down, so the places that it might have got more of its votes, because we do vote for what's familiar to us. And I do think that Do Ya has elements that will speak across cultures in a way that not all Balkan pieces necessarily do. I mean, look, I'm coming from an atypical Western European place. Like the thing that makes me love the Balkan entries is the fact that they remind me of Persia, of Iran, right? Like that's not typical. So I know that there are big fans of the Balkans across Europe, but I do think that there's something quite regionally specific about the sound of a lot of their pieces, and the sound of Do Ya is regionally specific. So given that we'll be 3 Balkan countries down this year, that will affect the qualifying from the semi-finals. How it'll affect it, that's up for, we'll see how that goes. But I think Do Ya is way more competitive and to me much more compelling than Evita. I actually despised Evita. I thought it was a really difficult performance to watch. I don't like her voice at all. I don't like her performance style. So, I really am coming at it from like the opposite end. I know there were lots of people who are like, absolutely wish that was going to Eurovision. That's my favorite. Can't relate. Literally, probably my least one in my bottom 3 of the entire festival. so I'm personally really happy that Duya is going, because I think it's a banger. But there is also the fact that I think that if the juries, if we still had the juries in the semi-finals, then I think that Evita might have, might have stood a better chance of qualifying possibly than Duya. But given the semi-finals are going to be all televote, I think Duya miles and away has the better chance of qualifying, as it should. I'm really happy about that. But I will also say that I think that if the FIC juries had Eurovision in mind, as they will have done every other year until this year, given that it's the first year that we had the jury winner not necessarily going to Eurovision and the winner of FIC, the Eurovision representative being chosen entirely by the public this year. Given that, I think if the juries had Eurovision in mind as well as the festival trophy in mind when they voted, I think that they would have chosen Duya as their winner. Now, I could be wrong, this is speculative, but I just feel like Duya came second, Albina and her family came second with the juries. So I just think that the fact that Eurovision has now been taken out of the mix as far as the jury voting, as far as the awards go at FIC, I think that has had an effect. And I think that that's good. I actually think that it was something that the national final, or that Festivali Këngës was struggling with, this dual identity as a national final. And it's, like Jazzi said, not a national final, it's a song festival. So it was trying to be a song festival, but it also had to bear in mind that the winner would go to Eurovision. That wasn't working. Yes, we got some great winners, but it hasn't been working for Albania. They haven't been doing as well as they, I think, should be doing, given the quality of music that comes out of that country. So I'm glad that they've split it completely now. I think that's great. And yes, I think that it will work in Albania's favour in Liverpool.
I agree. I think moving to all televote for the Eurovision representative this year, in a year where televote has been changed in a larger contest to be weighted much more heavily, was a very smart move, because it's like growing with the contest and adapting with the contest, and it was a very smart move, because they were like, well, how can we get this to work in our favor? We'll take our jury out of the equation to some degree. And I liked Evita. I did like it. It wasn't my favorite by any means. But I think that technically she did do really well. But I also think that, considering that it's a song about her daughter, that the song would have eventually and inevitably elicited comparisons with Tamara Tedesco's Proud, which is also a Balkan song about her daughter. And that's really all that those two songs have in common. But it would have elicited a lot of comparisons, nevertheless, even just because of those two things. And I think that not sending that is probably better, because I feel like Duya is less likely to be compared to really recent songs in that way and held up against that. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But I think ultimately it will work in Albania's favor, but it might take a little while before we can actually see the fruits of that. Because like Isabelle said, Albania is a country that has historically really struggled to qualify more generally, and it doesn't have a lot of cultural similarities with a lot of the rest of Europe, and that really does affect the voting. And that's okay, to be clear. Political voting is okay in my heart. I am at peace with that. So I think that they're going to struggle to qualify anyway, but I think that if they keep up this method, it will eventually pay off for them as they kind of trial and error it out, and as the contest continues to sort of grow and evolve. I think that ultimately it will help them, but I'm not sure that we're going to see the fruits of that this year.
I feel like this change will definitely benefit Albania when I look at Evita and I look at Duya. I feel Evita was a nice song, but I do feel like for me, that is it. And for me, that's a cardinal sin in Eurovision, because I think if you're just nice, you are not going to do well, particularly this year. when is no jury to save you in the semis. Like, the public has to get behind you, and the public would not have got behind this. Vocally, it's a brilliant performance, and obviously that is a huge focus of Festivali Këngës. I am not sure televoters at home would have picked up the phone and voted for this. I think it would have just passed a lot of voters by. It just wouldn't have worked. Well, for I do think there'll be like people that are voting in our Albanian semi that will vote for this. Like, there will people that culturally will feel touched by this song. Like, there's people in other countries that will vote for this and identify with Albina and her family. So I feel like this has such a better chance to do well at Eurovision than Evita. I think Albania letting the public have a say in their entry will obviously be a benefit as well, because obviously there is a lack of jury voting at this year's Eurovision Song Contest. So I think this will work for them in Liverpool, and I do think I agree with what Shiloh said. I don't know if it'll work 100% this year, but I do think they need to keep at it, because I think ripping up the rule book after their non-qualification, like in 2022, undeserved, by the way, deserved to qualify, but that's another topic for another day. I just think what else could they have done there? They didn't qualify, so let's rip up the rule book and let's try again, because we may as well. And I feel like a lot of countries like need to start doing this if they like don't qualify. So I definitely think like there's leaves to be taken out of Albania's book here. I don't know whether Italy would ever try this if Italy got a poor result, or would they let the public choose their Eurovision entry? I don't know. Like,
Jazzi, hell will freeze over before Italy gets a poor result.
Yeah.
Like,
hell will freeze over before Italy decides to take things out of the jury's hands, rather, I think.
I think that there's something that you both touched on, and I know that I've touched on it before as well, which is that some countries we have expectations of certain countries. We, as in the whole public, the jury and the televoters all have expectations of certain countries. On the one hand, Albania is very culturally different from a lot of places in Europe. On the other hand, it's not at all. I've said before that Albania resembles Italy a lot in its sensibility, in its musical sensibilities. But we see Italy singing in Italian, and we all sort of melt. I say we broadly because I've infamously been exasperated by it. Like, we hear a song in Italian, which is like, oh, the beautiful Italian, the most beautiful language on earth, and all of this nonsense. And we just basically will always, we always seem to kind of give heap points and praise onto Italy for being sentimental and sending a basic lad in a suit singing a nice song, but it's emotional and it's Italian. And the thing is, Albania does the similar sort of thing, yes, more often with women than with men, and I think that does make a difference. It shouldn't, but it does. But for some reason, it's not afforded the same status by the voting public, by the juries, maybe even, it's sort of like we don't think of Albania when we're voting. And I think that that's unfair, because I think that Albania has equal quality to places like Italy, and it brings its own different elements, those Balkan elements, those ethnic elements that are, so unique. It deserves to be recognized.
I feel I'm about to say something really controversial here, and I think these two know what I'm going to say, because I'm a huge Italy not fan. Albania send better entries to Eurovision than Italy, in my opinion.
I don't disagree. I think that if you take it year by year and over the course of the contest, and obviously Albania's been in the contest much less time than Italy has, but I think that they've often sent quite similar entries in different years. Italy has more of my all-time favorite entries than Albania does, but it also has a lot more of my all-time least favorite entries than Albania does. I think Albania is much more consistent, but it's Italy that has the reputation for being this consistent powerhouse, and I think that's unfair. I wasn't expecting this to turn into like an Italy hating session, although I'm always here for that. I love Italy in the contest, especially in the recent contest. Okay, very specifically in the recent contest, I've loved what Italy has done. And I think that it's great to see Albania kind of, it wants to do, I mean, Festivali Këngës is inspired by Sanremo, so many of these festivals have been, including Eurovision. It wants to do that. I mean, down to the graphic that I pointed out during, like, the artist graphics is really doing its Sanremo thing. But the thing is, it makes sense because FIC makes sense as a music festival, the way that Sanremo makes sense as a music festival. We saw
it's
so
very
much
cohesive.
Yeah, we saw so much beautiful instrumentation and orchestral business going on at this year's FIC. It's good that it's leaning into that, and I thought that the variety of the shows, not just in terms of the songs, but also in terms of the acts that they brought on, really, like, it's clear that they're doing the Sanremo thing, right? But they are doing it in their own way, and it's leaner, as you said. It's leaner than Sanremo. It's more streamlined. That's great, right? It's great for us, right? Especially over here, not actually kind of there. I think that as a first year, with all of these changes and with also some kind of smaller changes throughout the production, I think that this was a roaring success. Like, imagine they take this kind of, this new jury televote split, this new system. They take all of the little changes that they made to make it more like a festival separate to Eurovision, and they keep applying that, and it's going to keep getting better if they stick with this. So I love tearing up the rule book, but I think that you do need to kind of give it, like Shiloh suggested, a couple of years to settle in and see how it plays out, because I don't think that they should be disheartened if they don't qualify this year, because it's a real possibility. It always is with Albania, but less because of the quality of the act, more because of the way that Albania is perceived, I think, or not perceived within Eurovision.
This might need to get edited out, sorry, but I think I do think it's probably just like a general classism thing that's just like, oh yeah, everybody, like, Italy's great because it's Italy, and Italy is like cool and Western, that's what I have to say about that.
I think it is controversial, and I think it's a conversation that we're not ready for, but we should be ready for, because I completely agree. I think if you actually look at it, Albania has all of the same class, even more interesting ethnic identity within that, a lot of the same musical sensibilities, and it just doesn't get the same treatment as Italy. And it's because we see Italy as a high status country culturally. Absolutely, 100%.
So I do
Euro snobbery.
I do need to wrap this up now, but I will just quickly say that takes us to the end of this Festivali Këngës recap video, and a little bit on Sanremo as well. I would like to thank Isabelle and Shiloh for joining me today, and be sure to give this video a like, and also give that Eurovision site a subscribe. For any other video content that we have coming up, there'll be loads, because it's national final season. We'll have interviews, we'll have national final recaps, we'll have it all. Please make sure to give us a like on our socials as well, over at that Eurovision site on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Mastodon, to keep up with all the Eurovision 2023 news and all the national finals that are going on, because there's going to be a lot. Also, be sure to give our podcast a follow, That Eurovision Podcast on Twitter, That Euro Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, so you can be kept up to date for whenever we release a new episode. And be sure to check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And I feel that's all that's left to say now is